I'm not being a conspiracy theorist when I say this. This is literally setting up the Ministry of Truth and creating the thought police.
We have breaking news. The new version of Bill C-63 has been tabled today as Bill C-34. In some ways, it's better, but in others, it may be even more concerning. Bill C-34 defines, quote, content that foments hatred, end quote, as harmful content, pressures platforms to mitigate and report on that content, and creates a new Digital Safety Commission with the power to hold hearings, compel evidence, designate its own inspectors, seek warrants, enter property remotely or physically, access computer systems, and impose massive penalties. This is being sold as online safety, but Canadians need to understand the machinery being built here. A new federal regulator with coercive enforcement powers attached to online speech.
Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Bill C-34, an act to enact the Digital Safety Act and the Digital Safety Commission of Canada Act, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. First reading, June 10th, 2026. So this is a very, very, very long bill, and there's a lot of aspects to it. So the first thing that we need to say is, unlike Bill C-63, Bill C-34 actually doesn't really talk a lot about the ordinary social media user. That's the interesting part about this. It really focuses on the operators like Facebook and Instagram and X and all of the other social media platforms. Now, before we get into the actual bill itself, there's a few definitions that are in the bill that we need to talk about.
Content that foments hatred means content that expresses detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of a prohibited ground of discrimination within the meaning of the Canadian Human Rights Act, and that, given the context in which it is communicated, is likely to foment detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of such a prohibited ground. For greater certainty and for the purposes of the definition, content that foments hatred, content does not express detestation or vilification solely because it expresses disdain or dislike, or it discredits, humiliates, hurts, or offends.
This is the problem with a subjective term such as hatred. They have to define it and then add some clarity to it, and even then, it's not exactly clear. They refer to anything in the Human Rights Act, but this becomes problematic when you're looking at what people are posting online, because someone has to make the judgment, does this actually violate the Human Rights Act or does it not? Does this classify as hatred or does it not? This isn't, did the person break into the building or did they not? Did they shoplift or did they not? That is demonstrably provable. Something like this is an opinion. And this is the biggest problem when you're trying to regulate speech. So let's get to the purpose of C-34. Here's the purpose. It goes through a couple of different things. It talks about protecting children. We can all get behind that. It talks about protecting safety. We can all get behind that. But there's a couple of things in here that we do need to address. So you'll notice in a couple of these clauses here that they refer to harmful content. So C, considering that exposure to harmful content online impacts safety and well-being of persons in Canada, and in D, enable persons in Canada to participate fully in public discourse and exercise their freedom of expression online without being hindered by harmful content. What is harmful content? Well, harmful content means, again, we've already identified hateful content, but now we have to identify harmful content. So that means intimate content, communicating without consent, content that sexually victimizes a child, re-victimizes a survivor, etc., etc. And you'll see down in E, content that foments hatred.
This is a very circular definition.
Right. So you're using these subjective terms to try to nail down definitions that can be used in legislation and then drawn on by law enforcement and others, and we'll get to who those others are in a minute. But this is the issue when you're talking about opinion-related offenses, especially speech.
Well, and furthermore, many of those things that were listed on the previous screen are already legal. You can actually call the police in your city, or if you don't have a municipal police force, you can call like your provincial police or the RCMP. Like, these are criminal offenses already.
Right. We don't need a new agency. We don't need new money. We don't need anything. We just need support for law enforcement to actually do their job and execute the laws that are actually in place today. But let's get a little further down here. This is what they're presenting as the core of this bill, but we're going to get to some other concerning aspects later. This section says that social media platforms have to act responsibly, and they have to abide by their own rules, and they have to abide by the rules that the government is actually setting out for them.
Well, honestly, that I can get behind, because we're going to drop a video soon on our experiences with Meta. And I think if these platforms just enforce their own terms of service and enforce them in a reasonable time frame, a lot of these problems would disappear.
So instead of actually targeting the individual user like C-63 did, this targets the operators of the platform. Here's one of the concerning parts. So it talks about this harmful content again. So this is Section 33 of the bill. The operator of a regulated social media service must implement any measures that are provided for by regulations to mitigate the risk that users of the service will be exposed to harmful content on the service. Sounds good in principle. What's the problem? The problem is these regulations aren't going to be decided in a bill. These are going to be decided by a body such as, the CRTC.
It's not going to be decided by them. It's going to be decided by another bureaucratic nightmare similar to them.
And decided by people that are not elected by you and me. Access to inventories and electronic data. So, the Commission may, on request, and in accordance with the criteria set out in the regulations, accredit a person other than an individual for the purpose of giving that person access to the inventories of electronic data that are included in digital safety plans that have been submitted to the Commission under subsection 42, 58, and 59, if the Commission determines that, etc., etc. One of the things that this bill does is it sets up this digital commission, and it mandates certain collection of data by the actual operators. So they have to categorize and label anything that they may even suspect to be harmful. And that goes in one database. Now they go on to say, well, we're not going to attribute that to, any, particular user or anything like that. So, that's fine. But we'll get back to why that's a concern in a minute. And this is allowing any person that they designate to be accredited to actually go in for research purposes to look at any of this data.
So I don't know if they want to see who is providing a right of center viewpoint on legislation. Perhaps we'd get dinged with that designation.
Well, if the CRTC were to regulate that as a problem or potentially harmful content, then the social media platforms would be obliged and mandated to actually label that and categorize that. See where this is going? So this is how the Commission will actually enforce all of these new rules and legislation. So you can see where it says Commission's powers in ensuring an operator's compliance. Again, operators like Facebook or X or someone like that. With this act or investigating a complaint made under subsection 68, the Commission may, in accordance with any rules made under Section 9 of the Digital Safety Commission of Canada Act, summon and enforce the appearance of persons before the Commission and compel them to give oral or written evidence on oath and to produce any documents or other things that the Commission considers necessary in the same manner and to the same extent as a superior court of record. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not saying it, but this is creating a digital tribunal. That's what's going on here. They can administer oaths. They will receive and accept any evidence or other information, whether on oath, etc., etc. Let's skip down to rules of evidence. In exercising its powers and performing its duties and functions under the Act, the Commission is not bound, and I repeat, not bound, by any legal or technical rules of evidence. Again, the only people that we're expecting to be summoned before this type of commission are operators and witnesses to comment on things about what the operators have done or not done in ensuring that harmful content is not available on their platforms. So this comes down to this interesting aspect of standard of evidence, because earlier you heard me read that they're essentially setting up these inquiries kind of like a superior court. Yet we're not going to bound by ourselves by the same standard of evidence by the superior court, because the court can only use things that meet a certain standard of evidence to be able to be admissible. What they are saying outright here is, well, we don't need to worry about that. Now, is anybody going to cry about, the standard of evidence that they're actually using against Facebook or X or these technical conglomerates? Maybe, maybe not. Objectively, we have to put that out there. But we also have to understand that it becomes a slippery slope when you start invoking these types of tribunals. There was a case that James Kitchen actually was litigating for about a month or two ago about a gentleman out west who was hauled before a tribunal and fined hundreds of thousands of dollars because he made hateful rhetoric.
It was $750,000, and you can check that interview out in our interviews playlist.
And now that's actually going to be brought forth to an actual court where they will need standards of evidence to be able to decide on such things. So, the real terrifying part is about to come. Inspections. The Commission may designate as inspectors persons or classes of persons that the Commission considers qualified for the purposes of verifying compliance or preventing non-compliance with this Act. Certificate. The Commission must provide every inspector with a certificate of designation. An inspector must, if requested to do so, produce their certificate to the person appearing to be in charge of any place that they enter. Enter, you say? What does that mean? Warrant to enter place. An inspector may, if authorized by a warrant issued under subsection 79, enter any place for a purpose relating to verifying compliance or preventing non-compliance with this Act. Consent to enter place. For the purpose referred to in subsection 1, an inspector may, with the occupant's consent, enter any place in which they have reasonable grounds to believe that there is any document, information, or other thing relevant to that purpose. Now, it's interesting that they say that they need consent right after they say they can enter a warrant, which, if you have a warrant, you don't require consent. Entry by means of telecommunication. An inspector is considered to have entered a place if they access it remotely by means of telecommunication. Here's some other powers they have. Examine any document or information that is found in the place, copy it in whole or in part, and take it for examination or copying. Examine any other thing that is found in the place and take it for examination. Use or cause to be used any computer system at the place to examine any document or information that is found in the place, and it goes on. Duty to assist. The owner or person in charge of the place and every person in the place must give all assistance that is reasonably required to enable the inspector to exercise their powers to perform their duties and functions under this section, and must provide any document, information, or any other thing that is reasonably required for that purpose.
This is frightening because right now, if a business, let's say Northern Perspective, we're a business, let's say we're doing something totally illegal and the police want access to it. They need a warrant. They can't just charge into my house and take all my computers unless they have a warrant.
Well, and even if they did, they're the police. They're separate from the government. They're technically an independent body. This is not.
No, this is essentially a crown corporation.
This is a government agency. Okay, this is vastly different. So what we're understanding from this bill is they're effectively able to deputize people to be able to carry out investigations, go anywhere they wish, take anything they wish, inspect anything they wish. And even though they say they should have consent before getting in, a few sections down, there's the duty to comply. So if they're asking you to enter your house, how can you say, well, they need consent when you also in the Act say that there's a duty to comply to ensure that they can comply with the Act?
Right. And again, in this case, it's for social media platforms like Meta, like YouTube, etc. But still, businesses and the people within those businesses have rights. As I said, a police officer can't just come and barge in here and start going through my computer and rifling through all our papers and whatnot without a warrant. We would have a responsibility, I would assume, as a business to contact an attorney and be like, hey, they're presenting me with this warrant. What do I do? Or the police want to come in without a warrant. What do I do? But in this case, we're saying that if you operate a social media platform, you have to comply with these rules. You have no rights.
Well, the other thing I need to point out is this section doesn't actually specify operators. This says any place. So if they came to your door and they said, I need to come in and I need to ensure that this act is being followed, you have to let them in, especially if they have a warrant. So it doesn't say the place of the operator. It says any place. This is the very concerning part about this bill as written. They can come in and they can say, yeah, I need to examine your computer. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to take it.
So then not only is this a horrific bill, it's written very poorly too.
Right. This throws privacy out the window. Use of force. An inspector is not entitled to use force in executing a warrant. This is the key part. Unless the use of force has been specifically authorized in the warrant and the inspector is accompanied by a peace officer. They can take a police officer with them and say, barge this door down. We're going in and we're taking whatever we need. This is a government agency basically taking police officers with them and saying, I have authority to come in here and the warrant says I can use force, so let's go.
Could you imagine the CRTC coming in and like knocking your door down and be like, are you stealing cable? Like, that's kind of what this is.
And then taking anything that they wish because they classify it as part of their investigation. Now, this is for the operators. The maximum penalty for a violation of this act, the greater of $10 million and 3% of the gross global revenue in the financial year before the one in which the penalty is imposed of the person that is believed to have committed the violation in the case of a person that is not an individual, and the greater of $10 million and 3% of global gross revenue in the year before on which the penalty is imposed of the person that is believed to have committed the violation in the case of an individual. So what that means is if Facebook was found to be violating this act, they have to either pay $10 million or 3% gross revenue. I'm pretty sure $10 million is a lot less than 3% gross revenue.
Right, but didn't it say the greater of the two?
Right.
Yeah.
So that means the 3%.
Right. And if you have, Bob, the IT technician who works at Facebook, and he's found guilty of whatever it happens to be, they can still charge him, it seems like, it by point B.
Well, it's the operator, really, because it's going to be the person that's actually found to be accountable for that platform to be violating the act.
So then if Bob, the IT technician, is doing something he shouldn't be at Facebook and gets caught, even though he's the guilty party, it's Facebook that gets...
And that's usually the case for many of these corporate crimes. It's there's people that have legal liability on part of that. Now, it depends what Bob is actually doing at Facebook to do that. But there's other aspects to this as well. If Bob decided to make his own platform and he's trying it out, and there's only like 3 people that are using it, but it was found to be violating this, now Bob is subject to a $10 million fine.
Poor Bob.
Sucks to be Bob. Sucks to be anybody innovating anymore. But this is where this is directed at the operator. So, first aspect of this is because of these penalties, which cost a lot of money, this is going to most likely, in my opinion, cause operators to invoke a chilling effect on online content. And maybe that's the intent of the government in this bill. We don't know. Because what they're going to do is err on the side of caution. So anything that they think might be, related to harmful content, they may just flag and ban.
Right. I mean, look at Northern Perspective. We talk about things across the entire spectrum, drug use, crime statistics, abortion, just anything to do with politics and law and how these things fit into Canadian society. So what's going to happen to a channel like ours?
Now, the interesting aspect that I found of this is, it's like, I keep harping on this, it doesn't address the ordinary person who's using this platform. And then I realized it doesn't need to, because it already has been addressed in a different bill. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the definition of hate crime from Bill C-9. Offense motivated by hatred, everyone who commits an offense referred to in the section as the included offense under this act, etc., 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 is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to the punishment provided for in subsection 5, or guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction. This bill by itself, it seems incomplete, and that's because it is. Because I think what they actually did with C-63 is they took the advice of all these different civil liberties groups and split it up. Because that's exactly what they did. Because you have C-9. So that's the criminal law layer. That actually lays out for the individual people what exactly hate is, and what a hate crime is, and what the punishment for it is. C-22, that's your Lawful Access Act. So in that, they actually require Facebook and all these other social media platforms to build this digital repository for all the interactions that you actually have as an individual person, and keep it for up to a year. And then C-34 categorizes it and labels all of that. So it doesn't actually have to attribute it to you, because they already have all the metadata required under Bill C-22. And it's not going to be a lot of effort to actually link that to what is in C-34 in terms of the labeling. So you have Bill C-9 that creates the offenses, you have Bill C-22 that actually creates the access, and Bill C-34 that creates a new government agency with government inspectors that can actually come into your house and take anything that they want. And then that goes back, and then you may be subject to a hate crime as a result of all of that. This is terrifying.
This is like straight out of 1984.
This, and I'm not being a conspiracy theorist when I say this. This is literally setting up the Ministry of Truth and creating the thought police. That's what this is. Now, the government will say, no, these inspectors, they're just meant for Facebook.
Then why doesn't the bill say that?
Right. It says nothing like that. It would be a lot different if these inspectors only had access to these actual operators. But still, why do we need these people in the first place? There's another organization that does this, and it's called, the police.
Right. And you know what? If it's not a criminal matter, then it becomes a civil matter. And we had just completed a civil case of our own.
Right.
Like, there are avenues currently that exist when people are being threatened, harassed, defamed, if their intimate material is being shared, etc. There are avenues that exist in law currently. So why do we need a new law?
So, ladies and gentlemen, we said that we'd be waiting for the new version of C-63, and we would be taking some action on it. Well, here it is, and yes, we will. So start writing your MPs, start writing the ministers, NP Nation. Let's get to work.